There was a small building on the corner of Maple Street in a quiet Ohio town. The paint was peeling. The roof leaked when it rained. The heating system made strange noises every winter. But for 15 years, this building had been something magical. It was called the Harmony Community Music School, and it had changed hundreds of lives. The man who started it all was a 72-year-old retired music teacher named Harold Shun. He had spent 40 years teaching piano at fancy private schools, where rich families paid thousands of dollars for lessons. He had seen talented kids go on to play at concert halls around the world, but something always bothered him. What about the kids who couldn't afford lessons? What about the children who had music in their hearts, but empty pockets at home? So, when Harold retired in 2004, he didn't buy a boat or move to Florida like his friends. Instead, he took his life savings and opened a free music school for children who needed it most. Kids from poor families, kids in foster care, kids whose parents worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Harold believed that every child deserved a chance to learn music, no matter where they came from. For 15 years, the school survived on donations and the kindness of strangers. Local businesses would chip in a few $100s here and there. Churches would hold fundraisers. Former students who had grown up and found success would send checks when they could. It was never easy, but Harold always found a way to keep the doors open. But by the winter of 2019, everything started to fall apart. The economy had been struggling. Many of the local businesses that used to donate had closed down. A big factory on the edge of town had shut its doors, and hundreds of families had moved away looking for work. The people who stayed behind were barely surviving themselves. They couldn't afford to give money to a music school when they were choosing between paying rent and buying groceries. Harold watched the donations slow down to almost nothing. The bills kept piling up on his desk. The electricity company sent warning letters. The landlord called every week asking about the late rent. The piano needed tuning, but Harold couldn't afford to pay the tuner. One of the practice rooms had a broken window, and he had to tape plastic over it to keep the cold air out. The 3 teachers who worked at the school hadn't been paid in 2 months. They stayed anyway because they loved the kids, but Harold could see the stress on their faces. They had their own families to feed, their own bills to pay. He couldn't ask them to work for free forever. Every night, Harold sat alone in his small apartment and stared at the numbers. They never added up. No matter how many times he moved things around on paper, the truth was clear. The school was dying. One cold evening in January, Harold called an emergency meeting. He asked all the parents and students to come to the main practice room after classes ended. About 40 people squeezed into that small space. Children sat on the floor. Parents stood along the walls. Everyone could tell something was wrong. Harold never called meetings like this. The old man stood at the front of the room. His hands were shaking. He had practiced what he was going to say 100 times, but now that the moment had come, the words felt like stones in his throat. He told them the truth. The school was 3 months behind on rent. They owed money to the electric company, the water company, and the heating company. The building needed repairs that would cost thousands of dollars. And the worst part was that there was almost no money left in the bank account. Harold explained that unless they could raise $50,000 in the next 3 months, the Harmony Community Music School would have to close forever. The room went completely silent. Then a mother in the back started crying. A father put his head in his hands. Children looked at their parents with confused, frightened eyes. They didn't fully understand money and bills, but they understood one thing. Their special place might be taken away from them. A young boy named Tommy, who was only 8 years old, raised his hand and asked if he could give his allowance money. He had saved $11 in a jar at home. Harold had to turn away for a moment because he didn't want the children to see him cry. For many of these kids, the music school was the only good thing in their lives. Some of them came from homes where there was yelling and fighting every night. Some of them had parents who were too tired or too broken to give them attention. Some of them had no parents at all and lived with foster families who were kind but overworked. At the music school, things were different. Here, someone cared about them. Here, someone noticed when they were sad and asked what was wrong. Here, someone celebrated when they finally played a song without mistakes. Here, they mattered. Now, all of that was about to disappear. In the corner of the room, sitting with her, knees pulled up to her chest, was a 12-year-old girl named Maya Thompson. She had long dark hair that she always kept over her face like a curtain. She never spoke much. Most people barely noticed her. But if you looked closely, you could see that she was shaking. Maya had been coming to the music school for 2 years. It was the only place where she felt like she belonged. Before she found this place, she had felt invisible, worthless, like she was just taking up space in a world that didn't want her. Music changed everything for her. When she sat at the piano, something happened that she couldn't explain. All the pain and loneliness that lived inside her chest would flow out through her fingers and into the keys. The piano understood her in a way that people never did, and now someone was telling her that this might all go away. After the meeting ended, parents stood around talking in worried voices. Some of them were already thinking about where else their kids could go. Maybe the school in the next town over-offered lessons. Maybe there was a church program somewhere. But deep down, they all knew it wouldn't be the same. Harold had built something special here, something that couldn't be replaced. Maya walked home alone that night. The streets were dark and cold, and her breath made little clouds in the air. She didn't feel the cold, though. She was too busy thinking about what she had just heard. $50,000. It might as well have been 50 million. Where would they ever find that kind of money? When she got back to her foster home, she went straight to her room without eating dinner. Her foster mother, Linda, knocked on the door and asked if she was okay. Maya said she was just tired, but she wasn't tired. She was terrified. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. And somewhere in those dark, quiet hours, a thought began to form in her mind. It was small at first, like a tiny seed. But as the night went on, it started to grow. She didn't know how yet. She didn't know if it was even possible. But Maya made a promise to herself in that moment. She was not going to let the music school close. She would find a way to save it, even if nobody believed she could. To understand why that music school meant so much to Maya, you need to know where she came from. You need to understand the road she had walked before she ever touched a piano. Maya was born in a small apartment on the rough side of town. Her mother, Grace, was young when she had her, only 19 years old. The father left before Maya was even born. He just disappeared one day and never came back. So it was always just the two of them. Maya and her mom against the world. Grace worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She cleaned offices at night and worked at a laundromat during the day. She was always tired. Her hands were always rough and dry from the cleaning chemicals. But no matter how exhausted she was, she always made time for Maya. Every night before bed, Grace would sit with Maya and hum songs to her. She had the most beautiful voice, soft and warm like a blanket. She would stroke Maya's hair and sing old songs that her own mother had sung to her. Those were the happiest moments of Maya's childhood. Just the two of them in their tiny apartment, wrapped up in music and love. Grace couldn't afford piano lessons or music classes. But she saved up for months and bought a cheap electronic keyboard from a garage sale. It was old and some of the keys stuck, but Maya didn't care. Her mother showed her how to pick out simple melodies. Mary had a little lamb. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Maya would play those same songs over and over, and Grace would clap and cheer like she was watching a concert at a grand theater. Those were the good years. The years when Maya still smiled easily. The years when she still believed that everything would be okay. Then came the winter when Maya was 7 years old. Grace had been coughing for weeks. She said it was just a cold. She said she would be fine. But the cough got worse. She started losing weight. She was so tired that some days she couldn't get out of bed. Maya would bring her glasses of water and sit beside her, scared, but not understanding what was happening. By the time Grace finally went to the doctor, it was too late. The sickness had spread too far. There was nothing anyone could do. Maya was there when her mother took her last breath. She held her hand and felt it go cold. She was only 7 years old, and the person she loved most in the world was gone. After that, everything changed. Maya had no father, no grandparents, no aunts or uncles who could take her in. So she became a ward of the state, a foster child. Just another file in a stack of files on some social worker's desk. Over the next 5 years, Maya lived in 4 different foster homes. Some were okay. The families were nice enough, but they had their own kids and their own problems. Maya always felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Like she was taking up space it wasn't meant for her. Other homes were harder. One family took in foster kids just for the money. They fed her the cheapest food and gave her a mattress on the floor of a cold basement. She stayed there for 8 months before a social worker noticed something was wrong and moved her somewhere else. Through all of this, Maya stopped talking. Not completely, but almost. She would answer questions with 1 or 2 words. Yes, no, I don't know. But she never started conversations. She never shared what she was feeling. She built walls around her heart, so high that nobody could climb over them. The teachers at her school didn't know what to do with her. They called her shy. They called her withdrawn. They sent notes home to her foster parents, saying she needed to participate more in class. But how could Maya explain to them that talking felt pointless? That every time she got close to someone, they disappeared? Her mother had left her. Every foster family had given her back. Why would she open up to anyone when they were just going to leave too? By the time Maya was 10, she had given up on the idea of belonging anywhere. She went through the motions of life like a ghost. She went to school. She did her homework. She ate her meals. But inside, she felt empty. Like there was a hole in her chest, where her heart used to be. Then she was placed with Linda. Linda was different from the other foster parents. She was a 53-year-old woman who had never married and had no children of her own. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Her house was small but warm, filled with plants and books and soft blankets. On Maya's first night there, Linda didn't try to force conversation. She didn't ask a million questions or make Maya talk about her feelings. She just made a simple dinner, showed Maya her room, and said goodnight. But before she left, she stopped at the door and said something Maya would never forget. She said, "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. You don't have to be anyone but yourself here. This is your home for as long as you need it." Maya didn't believe her at first. She had heard promises before, but weeks passed, and Linda never pressured her, never got frustrated with her silence. She just kept being kind, day after day, like water slowly wearing down a stone. One Saturday afternoon, Linda took Maya to the Harmony Community Music School. She had heard about it from a coworker whose son took lessons there. She thought maybe music might help Maya open up. It was worth a try. When they walked through the door, Maya saw the old pianos and the posters on the walls, and the children laughing and playing. She felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Harold was the one who greeted them. He shook Linda's hand and then knelt down to look at Maya. He didn't talk to her like she was broken. He just smiled and asked if she wanted to try playing something. Maya sat down at one of the pianos. Her fingers trembled as she touched the keys. And then, without thinking, she started to play one of the songs her mother used to sing to her. She hadn't played in years. She didn't even know if she would remember. But her fingers found the notes like they had been waiting all this time. When she finished, the room was quiet. Harold was staring at her with wide eyes. Linda had tears running down her cheeks. "You have a gift," Harold said softly. "I don't know where you learned to play like that, but you have something special inside you." For the first time in years, Maya felt seen. Not pitied. Not ignored. Seen. From that day on, she came to the music school every week. Then twice a week. Then almost every day. The piano became her voice. All the things she couldn't say with words, she could say with music. The sadness, the anger, the loneliness, the tiny flicker of hope that refused to guide Harold became like a grandfather to her. He was patient and kind. He never yelled when she made mistakes. He just nodded and said, "Try again. You'll get it." And somehow, she always did. Linda noticed the changes at home. Maya started eating better. She started sleeping through the night without bad dreams. Once in a while, she would even smile. Small smiles, but real ones. The music school had given Maya something she thought she would never have again. A place where she belonged. A place that felt like home. And now someone was threatening to take it away. That night after the meeting, as Maya lay in bed making her silent promise, she thought about her mother. She thought about those nights when Grace would sing to her and tell her that she could do anything if she just believed in herself. Maya closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness, "I'm going to save it. Mom, I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way." Somewhere deep inside her, the tiny seed of an idea was still growing. The days after the meeting were filled with a kind of desperate energy. The whole community came together like they never had before. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to do something. Nobody was ready to give up without a fight. The parents organized a bake sale that first weekend. Mothers stayed up all night, making cookies and brownies and pies. Fathers set up tables in the parking lot of the local grocery store. Kids made colorful signs that said, "Save our music school," and waved them at passing cars. By the end of the day, they had raised $800. It felt like a victory, but when Harold did the math, his heart sank. At this rate, it would take them years to reach $50,000. The next week, they tried a car wash. A local gas station let them use their parking lot for free. Students and parents showed up with buckets and sponges and hoses. They washed cars from morning until sunset. Maya was there too, scrubbing tires until her arms ached. She didn't complain once. By the end of the day, they had made $600. Still not enough. Not even close. Someone suggested a crowdfunding page on the internet. Harold didn't know much about technology, but one of the younger parents helped him set it up. They wrote about the history of the school. They shared stories about how music had changed children's lives. They posted pictures of smiling kids sitting at pianos. Then they shared the link everywhere they could think of. Facebook, Twitter, email chains. Community message boards. The donations trickled in. $20 here, $50 there. A few kind strangers from other states sent $100 gifts with encouraging messages. It was touching. It was heartwarming. But after 3 weeks, the total on the crowdfunding page was just under $4,000. Harold added up everything they had raised. The bake sales, the car washes, the online donations, the spare change that children brought in from their piggy banks. Altogether, it came to just over $12,000. They needed 50,000. They had 12. And there were only 6 weeks left. The reality was starting to set in. People still showed up to help, but you could see the hope draining from their eyes. The conversations changed. Parents started talking about when the school closes instead of if the school closes. They started looking into other options for their children. Maybe lessons at a church in the next town. Maybe online videos. Maybe nothing at all. Harold tried to stay positive for the kids, but inside he was falling apart. He stopped sleeping. He lost weight because he forgot to eat. Some nights he would sit alone in the empty music room, running his fingers over the piano keys and wondering if he had failed all these children who trusted him. One afternoon, he started packing up some of the old books and papers in his office. There was no point waiting until the last minute, he told himself. Better to be prepared. But really, he was just tired of fighting, tired of hoping. Maybe it was time to accept that some battles couldn't be won. Maya watched all of this happening and felt like she was being torn apart inside. She saw the adults losing hope. She saw her friends at the music school crying and scared. She saw Harold moving slower, looking older, like the weight of the world was crushing him, and she still didn't know what to do. The idea she had that first night was still there, but it hadn't become anything real. She knew she wanted to help. She knew she had to do something. But what could a 12-year-old girl do that the grown-ups couldn't? Then one day, everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Maya was at her regular school, sitting in the back of the classroom like always, not really paying attention to the lesson. Her eyes wandered to the bulletin board by the door. There were all kinds of flyers and posters pinned up there. Announcements about school dances, sign-up sheets for clubs, ads for tutoring services, but one flyer caught her eye. It was bright yellow with big black letters at the top. It said, Regional Young Artists Piano Competition. Maya's heart started beating faster. She asked the teacher if she could use the bathroom, then stopped at the bulletin board on her way out. She pulled the flyer off the wall and read every word. The competition was for pianists under the age of 18. It would be held in 6 weeks at a concert hall in Columbus, about 2 hours away. Contestants would perform one classical piece of their choosing in front of a panel of judges. The performances would also be open to the public. And then Maya saw the part that made her breath catch in her throat. First prize, $25,000. $25,000. That was half of what the school needed. If they combined that with the $12,000 they had already raised, they would be so close. Maybe close enough to convince a bank to give them a loan for the rest. Maybe close enough to find one more donor to make up the difference. Maya stood in that hallway with the flyer in her trembling hands. Her mind was racing. Could she really do this? Could she really enter a competition against kids who had been training their whole lives? Kids who had private tutors and expensive lessons and years of experience? She thought about all the reasons it was a crazy idea. She had only been playing seriously for 2 years. She had never performed in front of a real audience before. She didn't even own nice clothes to wear on stage. But then she thought about Harold, about Linda, about all the kids at the music school who had nowhere else to go, about the little boy who offered his $11 of allowance money because he didn't want to lose his piano lessons. She thought about her mother, who always told her she could do anything if she believed in herself. Maya folded the flyer carefully and put it in her pocket. Then she walked back to class, but she didn't hear a single word the teacher said for the rest of the day. That evening, she went to the music school and found Harold alone in his office. He was sitting at his desk, staring at a pile of bills with empty eyes. He looked up when she knocked on the door, and for a moment he seemed surprised to see her. Maya walked in and placed the yellow flyer on his desk. Without saying a word, Harold picked it up and read it. Then he read it again. When he looked at Maya, his expression was a mixture of confusion and concern. "Maya," he said gently, "this competition is for advanced players. Kids who have been training for years. Some of them have already won awards. Some of them are practically professionals." Maya didn't look away. She didn't back down. "I know," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "But I want to try." Harold shook his head slowly. "The piece you would have to play, it would have to be something difficult. Something that shows real skill. We're talking about Chopin, Beethoven, Liszt. Music that takes years to master." "Then teach me," Maya said. Harold leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. He looked at this small girl standing in front of him. This child who barely spoke, who had been through more pain than most adults, who had every reason to give up on the world, but somehow hadn't. "Maya, I don't want you to get hurt," he said softly. "If you go there and it doesn't work out, the disappointment could be devastating." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Harold would remember for the rest of his life. "Mr. Chun, this school saved me. It gave me a reason to keep going when I had nothing. I know I might not win. I know it's a long shot. But I have to try. For you. For all of us, please." Her eyes were shining with tears, but her jaw was set with determination. Harold looked at her for a long time. He thought about all his years of teaching, all the students he had worked with. He had never seen this kind of fire in someone so young. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's do this. But Maya, if we're going to have any chance at all, you're going to have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Are you ready for that?" Maya nodded without hesitation. "I'm ready." The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Maya's life. Nothing she had been through before compared to this. Not the foster homes. Not the lonely nights. Not even losing her mother. Because this time she had chosen the pain. She had asked for it. And there were moments when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Harold didn't waste any time. The day after Maya showed him the flyer, he sat her down and explained what they were facing. The other kids in this competition would be playing pieces by the greatest composers in history. They would perform with perfect technique and years of training behind them. If Maya wanted to have any chance at all, she would need to play something extraordinary. He chose Chopin's Ballade. No, one in G minor. When Harold first played a recording of the piece for Maya, she felt her stomach drop. The music was beautiful, but it was also incredibly complex. It started soft and haunting, like a whisper in an empty room. Then it built and built, growing more intense with every measure. There were fast runs that seemed impossible. There were moments that required the kind of emotion that couldn't be taught. The piece lasted over 9 minutes, and every second of it was demanding. "This is what the judges will expect," Harold said. "This is the level we need to reach." Maya swallowed hard. "Can I really learn this in 6 weeks?" Harold looked at her with serious eyes. "I don't know, but we're going to try." They started that same day. Harold broke the piece down into small sections. He showed Maya the fingering for each passage. He explained the story behind the music, how Chopin had written it during a time of great sadness and longing. He told her that playing the notes wasn't enough. She had to feel the music in her bones. She had to make the piano sing with her own voice. Maya practiced for 5 hours every day. Before school, after school, late into the night when the rest of the world was sleeping. Her fingers moved over the keys until they cramped and ached. She played the same passages over and over, sometimes 100 times in a row, trying to get them perfect. The first 2 weeks were brutal. Maya couldn't seem to get anything right. Her fingers stumbled on the fast sections. Her timing was off. The music sounded mechanical instead of alive. Every time she made a mistake, she felt like crying. Every time she had to start over, she felt like giving up. There were nights when she came home and collapsed on her bed without eating dinner. Linda would find her there, face buried in her pillow, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Linda didn't say much during those moments. She just sat beside Maya and rubbed her back, letting her know she wasn't alone. Harold pushed her harder than he had ever pushed any student. He never yelled, but he never let her off easy either. When she made a mistake, he made her do it again. And again. And again. When she said she was tired, he told her that tired didn't matter. When she said her hands hurt, he said the pain would make her stronger. You wanted this, he reminded her one evening when she was on the verge of tears. Nobody forced you to enter this competition. You chose it. Now you have to earn it. Maya wanted to scream at him. She wanted to slam the piano lid shut and run out of the building and never come back. But she didn't, because she knew he was right. And because every time she thought about quitting, she thought about all the people who were counting on her. By the third week, something started to change. The passages that had seemed impossible began to feel a little easier. Her fingers were learning to move on their own, finding the keys without her having to think about it. The music started to flow instead of stumble. Harold noticed the change too. One afternoon, after Maya played through a particularly difficult section without any mistakes, he actually smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile in weeks. There it is, he said quietly. That's the Maya I knew was in there. Word had spread through the community about what Maya was trying to do. The other students at the music school started showing up to watch her practice. They would sit quietly in the corner of the room, listening with wide eyes as she played. Some of them made little good luck cards and left them on the piano for her to find. One boy brought her a chocolate bar and said it was brain food for musicians. The parents got involved too. A group of mothers got together and made matching T-shirts that said Team Maya on the front. They wore them to the music school and handed them out to anyone who wanted one. Soon half the neighborhood was walking around in those shirts. Linda did everything she could to support Maya at home. She rearranged her work schedule so she could drive Maya to practice every day. She made sure there was always a hot meal waiting when Maya got home, even if Maya was too tired to eat it. She never complained about the late nights or the early mornings or the sound of piano. Music coming from the school at all hours. One evening, about a week before the competition, Linda sat down with Maya at the kitchen table. She had something in her hands wrapped in tissue paper. I want you to have this, she said, handing it to Maya. Maya unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small silver necklace with a tiny piano charm hanging from it. It was simple and delicate and beautiful. It belonged to my grandmother, Linda said. She loved music more than anything. I want you to wear it when you play. Maya looked up at Linda with tears in her eyes. In that moment, she realized something important. Linda wasn't just her foster mother anymore. Linda was family. The final week was intense. Maya practiced until her vision blurred and her back ached from sitting at the piano bench. Harold worked with her on every detail, every tiny movement of her fingers, every breath between the notes. They went over the piece so many times that Maya could play it in her sleep. And sometimes she did, her fingers moving against the blankets as she dreamed. The night before the competition, Harold asked Maya to come to the music school one last time. When she got there, she found him sitting alone at the piano in the main room. The lights were dim. The building was quiet. He patted the bench beside him, and she sat down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Harold said something that Maya would carry with her for the rest of her life. Maya, I want you to listen to me. Tomorrow is going to be scary. You're going to walk onto that stage and see hundreds of people staring at you. Your hands might shake. Your heart might race. You might feel like you can't do it. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were soft. But I want you to remember something. Whatever happens tomorrow, you have already won. 6 weeks ago, you were a girl who was afraid to speak. Now look at you. You took on something that most adults would never have the courage to try. You worked harder than anyone I've ever taught. You gave this community hope when we had none. His voice cracked slightly. Your mother would be so proud of you, Maya. I hope you know that. I am so proud of you. Maya felt the tears streaming down her cheeks, but she didn't try to stop them. Harold put his hand on her shoulder. Now go home and rest. Tomorrow, you're going to show the world who Maya Thompson really is. That night, Maya slept better than she had in weeks. And when she woke up the next morning, she wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The morning of the competition arrived with pale winter sunlight streaming through Maya's window. She opened her eyes and lay still for a moment, feeling the weight of the day, head pressing down on her chest. This was it. Everything she had worked for came down to the next few hours. Linda drove her to Columbus. The ride took almost 2 hours, but it felt like it passed in minutes. Maya sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the bare trees and gray fields roll by outside the window. She didn't talk much. Linda didn't push her. Sometimes silence was okay. When they arrived at the concert hall, Maya's heart nearly stopped. The building was enormous. Stone columns rose up toward the sky. Glass doors opened into a lobby filled with people in fancy clothes, carrying programs and speaking in hushed, important voices. This was nothing like the little music school on Maple Street. This was a different world entirely. They found Harold waiting for them near the entrance. He was wearing a suit that Maya had never seen before. It was old and a little too big, but he had clearly tried to look his best. When he saw Maya, his face broke into a warm smile. "There she is," he said. "How are you feeling?" Maya took a deep breath. "Scared," she admitted. Harold nodded. "Good. That means you care. Use that energy. Let it fuel you." They walked inside together and found the registration table. A woman with glasses and a clipboard checked Maya's name off a list and handed her a number. 14. She would be the 14th performer of the day. The next few hours were torture. Maya sat backstage with the other contestants and watched them go out one by one. Some of them looked confident, like they had done this 100 times before. Others looked as nervous as she felt. She could hear the music drifting through the walls, beautiful and intimidating. These kids were good. Really good. She thought about running. Just walking out the back door and disappearing. Nobody would blame her. She was just a foster kid from a tiny town with 2 years of real training. What was she doing here? But then she touched the silver necklace around her neck. She thought about Linda and Harold and all the kids at the music school. She thought about her mother singing to her in their little apartment. She thought about the promise she had made to herself in the darkness of her bedroom. She wasn't going to run. Not today. When they called her number, Maya stood up on shaking legs. She walked through the door and onto the stage. The lights were blinding. For a moment, she couldn't see anything but whiteness. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw the audience. 500 people sitting in rows of red velvet seats, all of them staring at her. She saw the judges at a long table near the front, their faces serious and unreadable. She saw Harold and Linda in the 3rd row, wearing their Team Maya shirts, their eyes filled with hope and fear. Maya walked to the piano. It was a beautiful grand piano, black and shining under the stage lights. She sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. They were trembling. The room went silent. so silent that Maya could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She closed her eyes in that moment. She wasn't thinking about the judges or the audience or the prize money. She wasn't thinking about the music school or the fundraising or everything that was riding on this performance. She was thinking about her mother. She remembered those nights in the tiny apartment. The soft voice, the gentle hands, the songs that made her feel safe and loved. She remembered the last time she held her mother's hand, feeling it grow cold as she slipped away. And she remembered what her mother always told her. You can do anything, baby, if you just believe in yourself. Maya opened her eyes and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade filled the concert hall, soft, haunting, like a voice calling from far away. Maya's fingers moved over the keys, and something magical happened. She forgot where she was. She forgot her fear. There was only the music and the story it was telling. The piece grew and changed, moving through sadness and longing and anger and hope. Maya played every note like it was a word she had been waiting her whole life to say. All the pain she had carried since she was 7 years old flowed out through her fingertips. The loneliness, the grief, the years of feeling invisible and unwanted. It all poured into the music, but there was something else too. Something brighter. The love she had found with Linda. The belonging she had discovered at the music school. The courage that had grown inside her over these past 6 weeks. That was in the music too, shining through the darkness like sunlight breaking through clouds. The final section of the piece arrived, fast and intense and demanding everything she had. Maya's hands flew across the keys. Her heart was pounding. Her breath was coming in short gasps. But she didn't falter. She didn't miss a single note. And then it was over. The last chord rang out and faded into silence. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. The audience sat frozen. Maya's hands hovered above the keys, trembling. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. And suddenly the whole room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet. The sound washed over Maya like a wave, so loud and overwhelming that she could barely breathe. She looked out at the audience and saw tears streaming down faces. She saw Harold with his hand over his heart, weeping openly. She saw Linda jumping up and down, cheering louder than anyone. The standing ovation lasted for 4 minutes. 4 minutes of thunderous applause that shook the walls of that grand concert hall. When the results were announced 2 hours later, Maya was standing backstage with her heart in her throat. The judges called out the 3rd place winner, then the 2nd place. With each name that wasn't hers, Maya felt hope and terror fighting inside her chest. Then the head judge stepped up to the microphone. And our 1st place winner, with a truly extraordinary performance that moved us all, Maya Thompson. The world seemed to stop. Then it exploded. Harold grabbed her in a hug, so tight she couldn't breathe. Linda was crying and laughing at the same time. The other kids from the music school who had come to watch rushed the stage and surrounded her. Chanting her name got $20,000. They had done it. But the story didn't end there. A man in an expensive suit approached Harold after the ceremony. He introduced himself as a local businessman who had come to watch his niece perform. He said he had never been so moved by a piece of music in his entire life. He asked about Maya, about the school, about why this competition mattered so much. When Harold told him the whole story, the man was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his checkbook and wrote a number that made Harold's knees go weak. $100,000. News of Maya's victory spread quickly. Local television stations picked up the story. Newspapers ran articles with headlines about the quiet foster girl who saved a music school with a piano. Donations poured in from across the state, then from across the country. People who had never met. Maya sent checks and letters and words of encouragement. the Harmony Community Music School didn't just survive. It thrived. They fixed the roof and the heating system. They bought new pianos. They hired more teachers. They expanded into the building next door. And Maya? She kept playing. She kept growing. She found her voice, not just in music, but in life. Years later, she would graduate from a prestigious music conservatory. She would perform in concert halls around the world. But every Saturday, no matter where she was, she would find her way back to that little school on Maple Street, because now she was the one teaching. Now she was the one helping other broken children find their voices through music. And sometimes, late at night when the school was empty and quiet, she would sit at the old piano and play those songs her mother used to sing. And if she listened closely enough, she could almost hear her mother's voice singing along. Some people said it was a miracle. But Maya knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was love. It was hard work. It was a community that refused to give up. And it was a 12-year-old girl who decided that her story wasn't over yet.